All right. So let's another thing that Android Studio has in it that's kind of new is this thing called Instant Run. So if you make a little change to the app and you hit play again, it doesn't actually relaunch the whole app. So sometimes you'll run into a situation where whatever you're testing didn't get updated. So you'll actually have to hit the little red square there for it to relaunch. And so it closed your app here. And then when you hit play, it'll launch the whole app again. So choose the one that you want to launch it on, and it'll see that it's already available, and it'll just relaunch it. Make sense? All right, so if you ever are testing something and didn't seem to update when you expected it to, just close the app and then relaunch it naturally. All right, so let's look at our designer here. So this part of Android Studio used to be really, really, really bad. This application, your interface designer used to be terrible. It's way better now, okay? But you do need to kind of learn your way around here. So first of all, this all looks very small right now, right? So this is difficult to work with at this size. So try to minimize some of these things to kind of give yourself some space. So usually putting the bottom thing away, this Gradle console, you hit this little thing over here, that minimizes it. You don't want properties to be minimized, but you could probably squeeze it over here a little bit, because once we start clicking on stuff, like I click on this guy, you'll see properties show up over here, and we might want to modify those guys. All right, so for instance, this guy, current text says hello world, I might want it to say LOL. All right, so it'll change it to something else. Now, this is only kind of the high level properties. I can view all properties on this guy, and it shows me the zillion of all the properties that are associated with this kind of animal. Okay, and this guy is a edit text. That's the kind of thing that is. Okay, so let me. Now, a pretty important part of what we're dealing with over here is the stuff over here on the left side. So up top here, these are the widgets. These are the things we can drag onto the screen. So we can drag buttons out here, and we can drag text views out here. We can drag radio buttons out here. Now, one thing that I want us to note here, and I teach this a very certain way because it's easier to create interfaces this way. The default top level layout. So down here with this thing called the component tree. And the component tree is just showing you, if you think about your screen as having a bag, okay, a top level bag, and everything that we put on the screen goes into this bag. And some things go inside of bags that are inside of this bag. All right, but we have to have a top level. The default top level layout is something called a relative layout. And what's nice and evil about relative layouts at the same time is they allow you to pull stuff off like this. You saw me put this button out here, and I was able to kind of throw it here relative to either the top of the screen or to the side of the screen or relative to the little label up here. So I have some control over where these things are on the screen relative to other things that are on the screen. Kind of the idea behind that is it then allows your app to kind of resize itself more easily for different size screens. And that's fine. And there's probably some truth to that. And once you got really good at using relative layouts, it probably is a good way of starting. At this point, I would encourage you to never use a relative layout. So the very first thing I do with any app I create, I build all my interfaces on Android Studio, all my simple interfaces, using only something called a linear layout. And linear layouts come in two flavors. They come in horizontal linear layouts, which means anything I add to it goes horizontally across the screen, and then vertical linear layouts, which means that anything I add to it goes vertically on the screen. So the very first thing I do with anything is I come into my code up top here, and I scroll down to my layouts, and I usually put my top level as my second to top level as a vertical linear layout. You can actually make it the top level if you really wanted to go in, because something that sometimes happens, this used to happen all the time. is you would not be able to do something drag and drop wise out here. Like you couldn't get it to land in the right place. You can click on text here and actually go over to the XML file that is the representation of that. So I actually could change this to a linear layout and change the things in here to make it so that the actual top level is a linear layout. There's no great reason to do that. I just take a vertical layout, I throw it out there, and I just make it fill the whole screen. All right, so notice that I'm currently selected on my vertical linear layout, and its width and height are meant to match its parent. So whatever the width and height of my relative layout is, this guy will be. He might as well be my top level now. So at this point, that relative layout is dead to me. It exists solely to hold my vertical linear layout. Okay? Now, by this guy being a vertical linear layout, that means when I drop stuff in here, it will drop on top of each other. Okay, so let's just throw some buttons in here just to kind of see how this works. So I'll throw a button in there, then I'll throw another button in there, then I'll throw another button in there. So see how they're stacking on top of each other? Okay, now I'll go ahead and I'll throw a horizontal linear layout in here. So I build all my interfaces now in terms of vertical and horizontal linear layouts. So if I throw a horizontal linear layout in there, notice it fills up the space that's remaining, so you might have to mess with that a little bit. But I'm going to go ahead and I'll show you what I mean by that in a second. I'll throw a button in here. I'll throw another button in here. See how it's putting it next to it, not under it, because this one's horizontal. I'll throw another button in here. Okay, but notice that this entire linear layout here is currently taking up the rest of the screen. So I actually can't fit something else underneath there. Now, one thing you might sometimes find helpful is sometimes dragging it onto the screen here, it's hard to land where you want it to land. So what you can do is you can actually drop it in here. So now my button here is a child of my vertical linear layout. So my vertical linear layout currently has 5 children. This button, this button, this button, this linear layout which contains 3 buttons, and then this last button that we can't even see because the fat linear layout here is pushing it off the screen. So I can drag this guy up a little bit and then our button shows up, right? But really what I'd like to do is I want this horizontal linear layout to really just wrap around the stuff that's inside of it, okay? So that's where this whole layout width, layout height stuff comes in. So every single thing I'm putting on the screen right now is a view of some type. So this particular linear layout, when I have him selected, the properties that are over here are his properties. And rather than saying, I want this guy to match the parent, which means be as tall as you can until you have filled up the parent, I'm going to say, I want you to wrap the content that lives within you. I have 3 buttons that are sitting next to each other in there. Just squeeze in there to those guys. That's how tall I want you to be. I want you to be the height of your content. Does that make sense? All right. So, we can start designing interfaces like this. Kind of make sense? All right. And then you could put, we can have another vertical here. Let's.
After wrapping, does it expand? Let's say you want to have like some extra buttons in there.
So you mean if I want to put another button in this one? Yeah, it'll work. The buttons will just get smaller. So, because remember, this guy is a horizontal. So every button I add in there is just going to start squeezing that guy off. Okay? So, you will get to a point where your buttons are no longer useful. Now, you can actually do some neat stuff with that, though. One thing you could do is, and some of these things are actually easier to do with Android than they are to do on iOS. So there are some benefits here. There's a scroll view in here. this scroll view. And here's a horizontal scroll view. That's the guy I want. So I'm actually going to take this guy and I'm going to throw him in there. Okay? And this guy has a linear layout inside of him. I'm going to change that to a horizontal linear layout. And then I'm going to move these buttons inside of there. Okay, and then I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to drop a bunch more buttons in there. All right, so you kind of see them, they're coming out off the screen here. All right, but it hasn't affected the width of the buttons because these buttons are set up to wrap their content. So because they say the word button on them, that's how wide they are. Okay, but I have several buttons on that screen right now. So I go ahead and hit play. I can scroll through those buttons. Now, truth be told, that was pretty simple to do here, right? That is nowhere near that simple to pull that same thing off in on iOS. You could do it in iOS, but not in a matter of 10 seconds like that. So you do have some nice flexibility. It's one of those things when you've programmed in both of the environments, you kind of find the pros and cons of each. And when I'm working on iOS, I complain about the stuff that's easier in Android. When I'm working in Android, I complain about the stuff that's easier in iOS. They're both good. It ultimately just comes down to what you're most used to. I prefer writing iOS code, which is kind of weird because I actually probably prefer Java over Swift, which is the current iOS language. But I probably prefer Objective-C over Java, which is the old iOS language. It's all the same crap. That's what it comes down to. It's all the same crap.
So you want to put out layers of horizontal layouts, just like in your game.
Yeah.
Just like put multiple. How do you do that?
Okay, so let's come back out here. Let's kind of gut this a little bit since we have just a whole bunch of crap going on, right? So let's just highlight all that, get rid of it. Let's get here's our vertical linear layout. The other guy's still hidden in there. He's gone. Good. All right. So what do you ultimately want to pull off?
3 rows of horizontal.
You want our calculator.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's what she wants. She wants the calculator. So what we would do then is, let's say you want to have, so it's going to be a vertical linear layout to start with, and then you want to put 3 horizontal layouts inside of that. Okay. So I'll go ahead and we will drag a horizontal linear layout in here. Put another horizontal linear layout in here. We'll put another horizontal linear layout in here. And then we'll go and throw 3 buttons in each, you said? So there's a button. There's a button. There's a button. There's a button. Oh, did he land in the right place? Oh, yeah, he did. There's a button. 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 And then we need to tell each of these guys to all wrap their content for their height. Right? Because they all were trying to take up the whole screen because they all were trying to match the parent. And their parent is the vertical linear layout, which does take up the whole screen because he matches his parent, which is the relative layout. Does that make sense? Okay, so you can do all sorts of stuff like that to build your interfaces. So actually building an interface is not all that difficult. Okay, so now let's talk about the MVC thing for a few minutes. All right. Because we need to be able to access buttons and labels, okay? And then I also need to show you how to put pictures in there so you can get your dice and that kind of stuff. Okay, but as a starting point, I'm going to go ahead and once again gut all this. Okay, let's just throw a single text view out here. All right, single text view. That's a label. Okay, now his variable name by default is TextView3. That's probably not the best variable name. I'm going to go ahead and rename him. So I'm going to make sure I have this guy selected. I'm going to go into his properties, and for his ID, I'm going to give him a name that I'll be able to clearly identify because I need to reference this guy over in code. This gets back to MVC. It's a good idea to separate your code from your interface, those two sides. So I'm going to kind of name this guy MyLabel. All right. So his name is now MyLabel. Now, when I run this program right now, this has a single label on it that just has a text that just says text view on it. That's the default text that's in there. Now, what I'd like to happen is when my app launches, I want to programmatically set that text to my name. All right. I don't want to hard code my name in here right now. I know I could, but that doesn't show us the skill of what if I need to set my label to something during runtime, right? So I need to be able to access this label from over in my activity code. And this label's called MyLabel. So I'll go over here to my activity code. And the first opportunity that I have to deal with the widgets in here is inside of OnCreate. This is when my activity has been born, and therefore all of those labels and stuff are available. Okay? Specifically, it's after I've set the content view. So one thing I can do here is I can say text view TV is equal to the text view version of this dot find view by ID r.id.mylabel. All right, and it wants me to import text view. So on it's Alt Enter on your computer. It's Option Enter on a Mac, but that does the import up here. So we've imported Android.widget.textView. No different than when you do the import for Java.util.scanner. Same thing. All right, because the kind of animal that my label is something called a text view. Let me show you that out here. So this guy, yeah, when you highlight him, this guy is a text view. That's the kind of animal he is. All right, he's not a string, he's not an int, he's a text view. Okay. So I'm going to say, hey, I want to use this activity. That's what this is. This is how an object refers to itself from within itself. And this particular guy is an app compat activity. It's a screen in our application. We're saying, hey, screen, I want you to find one of the views that lives in you by his ID. Okay? And his ID is called MyLabel. Now, this class called R, there's a class called r.java, which is automatically maintained for you. You don't have to do anything special. This is how this is how Google implements MVC for Android. All right, they have this class called R that always stays up to date. It always has the collection of all of your widgets in it. So I can say, go to the class R, go to the ID section, and give me the unique value associated with MyLabel. Okay, so effectively, this guy is the address of where that actual label lives in memory. That actual text view lives in memory. And I'm saying, go and get me that view. So this guy is going to come out as a generic view. But I happen to know he isn't just a generic view. He is actually a text view. And text views have things like setting the text. Okay, so I'm going to say, go ahead and cast that guy to a text view. Store him inside this variable called TV, which is of type text view. And now I can go ahead and say tv.setText to my clipman. Okay, so now I am programmatically changing the text in that text view. I didn't do it by hard coding my clipman into the label. I'm doing it from code now. proving that I have access to this text view from within code, showing MVC at work. Does that make sense? So now when I run this, we'll see Mike Littman is on that label. Okay? So that's how MVC works for giving us access to the widgets so that we can do things to them on the screen. Okay? So, for example, when I click on this button, and I'll show you how buttons work here in a second, I want to set this label to something. As a response to the event associated with clicking this button, I want to change this label. Therefore, I had to have programmatic access to this label. Maybe it was called count label or something like that. That make sense? Okay. So now, let's go ahead and give ourselves a button. And what we want to do is we want to have this happen when the button is clicked. Make sense? All right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to write a function here called button one pressed. Okay. So this guy is going to be a public function. It's going to return nothing. It's going to be called button one pressed. Now, one important aspect here is this guy must take a view as a parameter. Okay. So we have to go ahead and Alt-Enter to import view. You don't have to name it V. You can name it whatever you want. In fact, a lot of times this is called sender. All right. What this dude is, so this is going to be a function that gets called by some event that happens in our interface, like a button click. Okay. The fact that this says button one pressed, we could have named this elephant if we wanted to. Didn't matter what we called him. But this guy is designed to be an event handler for something that happens on our screen. So when I do something to something on the screen, that ultimately, when that guy gets clicked, it calls this function, he will send himself in here. So if we are interested in which button, for example, called this function, I can ask myself which of my buttons was that guy. Okay. That isn't required, but might be helpful since all of these guys here all basically do the same thing, right? So we could have a single function that handles all of those clicks. And all we care about is which button did you actually click on? Because if you clicked on this one, I'm going to set this to D4. If you clicked on this one, I'm going to set this to D6, so on and so forth. Or you can certainly have a button, a handler for this, another function 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 for this. Where this function always sets it to D4 because only this button calls that function. That's fine. You know, this would be one of those situations where it probably makes more sense to do it the first way I said it, but it's only 6 buttons.
Isn't that the same for the calculator?
Yeah, calculator part of it, so now, you know, it starts adding up. But still, even with that in mind, we're not talking about hundreds of functions. You know, you write your 20 functions and you move on with life. Each function has 1 line of code in there, or 2 lines of code in there, right? The 7 button pressed function knows that the button you pressed was the 7 button, right? And I'll kind of show you how you can deal with that here in a few minutes. So I'll kind of give you the tools you need to take advantage of the trick way of doing it. It's not difficult. Okay, so let's come back in here. So button one press, what I'm going to have this guy do, I'm just going to steal that code. So instead of that happening when the app first launches, it's only going to set that text when somebody presses the button. Okay? So as a result of clicking a button, we're going to go ahead and grab our label and then set that label's text to something. Okay? So now I have a function to handle that. Again, we need to deal with MVC here, right? So I have logic for handling a button being clicked, but but I neither have a button or have I let that button know about this function. So now I got to go over to the interface side and do that. So I'll come here. I'll go ahead and throw a button into my vertical linear layout. So it's a big button there. If I double click on this guy, I thought I could double click and do it. Oh, it must not work that way anymore. It used to give you a little pop-up here that kind of gave you like the 3 most commonly used things, like the text in it and the ID, but now apparently it shows it. Actually, it makes sense. It shows kind of a cut-down version instead of view all properties, so it sort of does it already. All right, so I'll have the whole click me thing set up there. Now, one thing you might notice here is this button is pretty big, right? Because its width is set to match parent. I can say I want its width to wrap content, and it will look like that. But what if we want this guy centered? You know, what if I want this guy centered in the screen? There's this concept in Android programming known as gravity. Every view has gravity. Gravity works just like it does in real life. Okay, so if we were in this room right now, so we're all living inside of a view, okay, and if the gravity in this room was set to top, all of us would fly up to the ceiling. Okay? Right now, the gravity in this room is set to bottom. That's normal gravity, right? We're all stuck to the floor because some force is pushing down on us. If the gravity was top, then some force is shoving up on us. Okay? If the gravity was center, we'd all move to the middle of the room because some gravity is pushing us over and pushing us out and holding us down. Well, actually, not holding us down. It's pushing us up and pushing us down until we get to the middle. So we can set the gravity of our linear layout. So think of this guy like the room. And we can say, you know what? I want everything that's in here to be centered. I like to get sucked to the center. Because right now it's all left justified. It's just normal gravity. So I'm going to go to View All Properties. And notice I have my vertical linear layout selected here. I'm going to scroll down to gravity. And in here, there are a couple different versions of center. There's center vertically and center horizontally, but I'm just going to click center. Okay, now notice what center does. Center moves everything down here into the screen. That's kind of what we were just talking about in the room here, right? That we all moved kind of the middle. Okay, well, I don't really want him centered overall. I want him centered horizontally on the screen. So we'll uncheck this. And we'll say center horizontally. Okay. I want him to stay in the same vertical column where he was before, but go ahead and shove him to the middle of the room. So that would push me over here. That makes sense? Now, this guy right here, this text view, he's still set to have a width that matches parent. So it goes all the way across the screen. That's okay, because we might want to set the text to some big long string. But what if I want the text to be centered in there? So what we're going to do is we're going to set the gravity of that text view. Because what lives inside of that text view? Some text. So you can think of this text view as being his own little room. And he can have gravity of his own. So we'll set his gravity to be center horizontally as well. So I'll make sure that guy's selected. I'll go down to gravity. I'll go down to center horizontally. And the text sucks to the center. Because, you know, that's just some dude sitting in the room and all of a sudden gravity shifted on him and he flies to the middle of the room. That makes sense? So gravity is kind of an interesting way of handling these things in Android Studio. It's another way where I think it's superior to iOS development. In many ways, Android development is better. It used to be that those things didn't matter because the interface builder here was so poor. I mean, it was what you're seeing here is not as polished as what is on iOS. iOS's interface builder with Xcode is really, really nice. But if you would have seen this 3 or 4 years ago, you would be crying you're so happy when you see it the way it works now. It was terrible. You basically had to design all your interfaces like this 3 or 4 years ago. It was unusable. It's really, really bad. Okay, now you barely ever have to come in here. All right, so we've cleaned up our interface a little bit. We've centered our buttons. We made sure our text is centered, and we've done all this with gravity. Now, you can actually set the text, since it's a text view, you can set its attributes to have like left justified or centered, that kind of stuff. So normal text stuff. But I often find it easiest just to think about everything as a view and just say everything has gravity. Set the gravity the way you want it, okay? Rather than treating text views as some sort of special thing. Because anything we see on the screen at some level is a view, okay? But a view is very generic. So for example, a linear layout is a fairly generic view, but it still has some rules associated with it, right? This guy is a vertical one, and you can flip it around. You can change its orientation, even if you've already dropped it on there. You can change it from a vertical to horizontal. You don't have to go and grab a new one. That's the only difference between them, is what their orientation is. So these guys are almost plain Jane views, but they kind of have some special features, right? That by default, vertical ones kind of line stuff up vertically. Horizontal ones line stuff up horizontally. It's kind of helpful to think about them that way. All right, but we can certainly say as we move on, things like buttons. We see them, so they are views, but they do other things. They're kind of clickable things, right? We expect buttons to do something extra than what a normal view does. So these guys are clickable. We expect text views to be able to present some text on the screen. So they're a little bit more than a plain Jane view. All right? So I've kind of built my interface here. Now what I'm going to do is I want to go to the click me button. And I want a function to get called when I click on that guy. So we scroll down here, and notice by default he's clickable, so you don't have to set that. But you can disable a button by making it not clickable. But we want him to be clickable. So I'm going to go down here to something called OnClick. All right. Now, fair warning. In fact, I'm gonna show you this is what I used to do for this. I'm gonna go in here. I'm just gonna copy the name of my function just up to there. That's copied. They have inserted a new feature that sometimes works. It's nice because it lists all these guys for you, but it doesn't always make the connection. So when I go to OnClick here, I do the drop down. Notice it sees that function I wrote, which is nice. Now, when you do this, if your app crashes, it means it hooked it up wrong. Okay? This sometimes happens. So when I select that, it's going to show up like this. The fix usually is taking off the parenthesis main activity thing and just pasting what used to be there. But the last couple times I've used the newer versions, this has worked. So I'm going to leave it. Okay, just be aware if you try to hook up a button and your app starts crashing, it's probably because you're on click. The automated thing didn't really work out well. Okay, so now what's going to happen is when I launch the app, if I click on this button's on click property knows about the function that's over in my code. Again, MVC at work. What is it going to do? It's going to call this button one pressed function, passing itself in. We're not currently using that information, but we will in a second. I'll show you. So you can maybe adapt that for your code. So it's it's going to pass itself in there. And what am I going to do? I'm going to set the text to my clipman, but only when they've clicked that button. Okay? So we'll go ahead and launch the app. Button says nothing. I hit click me. Okay, this is what I was telling you. App crashed. Thing didn't hook up right. Go back in here. Go back here. Go to my on click. This is what ends up happening. It sees it twice. It's really, really frustrating. So I'm going to just take off the main activity part there at the end and press enter. And we're going to run it again. It's like it's almost good, but it makes like 2 passes and it finds the wrong version of it. Should work this time. So there's my clip. Make sense? Now, what if I had a button that was called first and another button that said last? And I wanted the button that said first to put my first name in that label. And the button that said last to put my last name in that label. Now, one approach to this might be this. We'll just call this button 1 pressed. I'm going to steal this. And we'll call this guy button 2 pressed. And button 1 will be the first name. Button 2 will be the last name. All right. Now, we're seeing here that we're kind of using this text view fairly often, right? So rather than re-grabbing it every single time, what I could do is I can go ahead and give myself a global variable up here. Private text view, TV. And then I can go ahead and set TV inside of OnCreate. So this is this.tv. So I'll give my text view a value in OnCreate. So we'll go ahead and we'll connect it up there one time. So then down here, we can just tell our text view this.tv to set the text. And we can just tell our text view this.tv to set the text. Because now we're seeing that there's some value in using that variable in multiple functions inside of our code. So why should we have to keep going and re-grabbing it from our interface? Make sense? All right. So button 1 puts the first name there. Button 2 puts the last name there. All right. So now we got to go hook up a second button. And we'll maybe rename our stuff for the first button. So we'll change this guy to just say first. And what I'll go ahead and do, we'll have some more layout practice. I'm going to throw a horizontal linear layout in here. I'll throw this button inside of that horizontal linear layout. And we'll tell that button to go ahead and, it's already set to wrap its content. So I'm going to throw another button into that second one. All right, and this guy is going to be last. And let's flip those around. Okay, so first and last now. First is still going to call that button 1 guy. Last is going to call our button 2 pressed, and we'll see if that worked that time. All right, we'll go ahead and hit play. So there's first. Second one crashed. So I'll go in here, take off the main activity thing, run it again, and now it works. It's so dumb. And it's been like that for years. So there's first, there's last. Okay. Now, what if, for example, we didn't want to handle that in two separate functions? What if we wanted to detect which of the 2 buttons you clicked by the value that was passed in? In order to do that, we need to programmatically have access to these 2 buttons so that we have their memory address. And we can ask, is the dude who called me the button that's called first? Or is it the button that's called last? Does that make sense? We could also check the text that's on the button if we wanted to. But let's deal with pointers here. So I'm going to go ahead and we're going to call this guy, instead of button 23, we're going to call this guy first button. So that's his variable name. That's his ID. We're going to call this guy last button. All right. Now, we're going to have last button call button 1 pressed. So first and last button both call the same function now. They both call button 1 pressed. So we're going to actually go ahead and delete button 2 pressed. Now we need to have access to that button. So we're going to come in here. So we're going to say private button first button, then private button last button. Then I'll enter for button to import that guy. And then inside of our OnCreate, let's go ahead and hook up those buttons so we have programmatic access to it. So we'll say this dot first button is equal to the button version of this dot find view by ID r dot ID dot first button. This dot last button is equal to the button version of this dot find view by ID r dot ID dot last button. So now I've connected our interface to our code. So then in here, I can ask the question, if sender is equal to this dot first button, set the text to Mike. Else, I can go ahead and spell it out. Sender is equal to this dot last button. I'll set the text to Lippman. So I'm saying is the memory address associated with this generic view, the dude who called this function, if it's the first button, if it was the first button that was pressed in order to call this function, let's set the name to Mike. Otherwise, set the name to Lippman. Make sense? Let's go ahead and run this. Hopefully it's okay with me setting the button 1 pressed for both of them, and I don't have to go and refix that. So I'll hit first. It's set to the first. I'll hit last. Okay, that one was broken. So we got to come back in here, go to last, hit the drop down. I guess probably the cleanest way is just to do this. So there's first, there's last. Both of those guys are calling the exact same function. It's that function that is asking the question, which button called me? Is the sender's memory address the same as the memory address called first button? This goes right back to that string literal thing we talked about earlier, right? I'm comparing memory addresses. Okay? Questions about how that works?
Can a component ID and make the condition like this component first button dot ID equal to?
I think you can do sender dot get ID, but the problem is get ID is an int, so you'd have to ask the question if sender dot get ID is equal to r dot ID dot first button, like that. So you can pull it off if you didn't need access to the buttons otherwise. All right, so now let's go ahead and let's throw some pictures on here because we're going to need pictures for our app, right? So we need Ninja Turtle heads, images. Ah, perfect. Who's this guy? It's on the laptop. I've taught this in class. This is Donatello. This is Leonardo. Those are the two guys on my laptop, so those are the two guys that are going to be in our app. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to save this image. Okay, we're going to put this, we're going to call this guy Donnie as a JPEG just in downloads for right now. And I'm going to, right click here, we'll save image. And this is Leo. Who's this guy? Orange is Michelangelo. Red is Raphael. You guys are going to bomb this final. Half the exam is on Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. All right, so now I have some images. Let's just see how big these guys are before I go too much further. Okay, so these guys are a little bit on the large size, but I guess that's not that big a deal. But here, I'll show you a little bit of editing stuff here. So if you want to take out this white background, you can use the Instant Alpha tool. I'm using Preview on the Mac, but lots of graphic things have Instant Alpha. So you click on the little magic wand. Sometimes it's called magic wand. So you click on that guy, and then you just click and drag into some open area that has all the same color, and it highlights all that color. It won't allow you to do this with the JPEG, so it has to convert it to a PNG. That's fine. So we're going to go ahead and take out the white space here. And then I'm going to adjust the size. We'll just make this guy a little smaller. So let's make this basically 1 inch by 1 inch, something like that. So there's Leo PNG. All right, let's do the same thing for Donatello. Take our magic wand, convert, adjust size. There's 1 inch by 1 inch, save. Okay, now here's the right way to do this. What would be nice is if you could drag the stuff in here, and it doesn't work. So the easiest way to accomplish what you ultimately need to do is any pictures you put inside of this folder called Drawable. Just like our layouts went inside of Layout, don't worry about these other ones. They mean something, but not to us, okay? So for Drawable, the best way to do this is to right-click on it and go down to, is it View in Finder or Show in, Reveal in Finder, or I think it's called Reveal in Explorer on a PC, okay? And when you click on that, it opens it up in your directory structure where that folder is. Okay? So I'll go into that Drawable folder, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to drag my 2 images in there. Okay? And it just picked up on it. Okay, so now they're in there. Now, one thing you need to be careful of, though, is if you're doing this with GitHub, doing what I just did does not include those guys in the project. So you'd have to right-click on them, go to, I haven't even checked it into the thing yet, so it won't matter. But if I had already, uploaded this to GitHub, and I'll show you how to do that before we're done so you can download my code and look at it. Then I had added these guys after the fact, I would have had to let GitHub know about these new files because I didn't create them using the Android Studio tools. I kind of sidetracked it by going in and finding it. Otherwise, I would have had to right-click on Drawable, say New, I think it would just be File, but then it's like a really weird directory structure you have to go through to actually find your files. It's not friendly. So it's easier to do what I just did. Just drag your files in there. Just know that if you were checking this thing back into GitHub, that those files will be left behind. Okay, they haven't been added to your local Git repository because of the way we added them. You'd have to let them know that you want it to be added. By right-clicking on them, it'll say Add to Git repository. All right, so I have 2 drawables now available to me. Now, since they're in the project, I can go to my activity here, and I'm going to click on this button, and we're going to set the background of the first one to Donatello. And we'll take the text out of there. We'll set the second one we'll set the background to Leonardo. Oh, wrong background. Background to Leonardo. We'll take the last out of there. All right. Now, in this particular case, because my buttons, these guys aren't rectangular in shape, I could force the size of these guys till they looked right. If I wanted to kind of force it, but you could just play with your interface or whatever. All right, but notice now that it no longer wraps content. Now it actually has a specific width and a specific height. All right, so that's fine for now. There's ways you can make it auto wrap and stuff like that, but that's how you get images to show up if you want to have images for your buttons. So there's my two buttons. I click Donatello, it's my first name. Click Leonardo, it's my last name, so on and so forth. That makes sense? All right, so let's review this guy here. This guy is a text view, right? The 2 + 5 + 4 + 3. So we know how to write stuff to text views. It happens to have a color set on it. You know, you can come in here to our Android Studio and you could change the text color for this guy. View all properties. I think it's just called text color. Yeah, text color right here. You know, if I want to change that guy to, click on that, to a color, and we'll make it pink. There we go. Now it's a pink color. So that's how you change the colors. Okay. Makes sense. This guy is a text edit as well, but really big text. So in the properties, you'll find the font size thing, so you can make it really big. These guys are all buttons that are hooked up to either a whole bunch of different functions behind the scenes or to one function that does, you know, probably for all the numbers, that concatenates onto this text view. This guy clears this text view. These buttons are all hooked up to a function that toggles between D4, D6, D8, D10, D12, and D20 on here. When we hit roll, it does what these two labels say to do. When we hit percentages, it rolls a D100 and gives you a number between 1 and 100 right here. Does that make sense? So I think we have all the tools that we need to write this app. Okay. So let me go ahead and I'll just show you how to check this thing into GitHub. It's actually pretty easy with Android Studio. The only tricky part is after the fact is if you want to, when you like add drawables, if you've lost them and you need to get them to be added to your project. In fact, I'll show it to you real quick. So I'm going to go ahead and we're going to go up to VCS. I'm going to say import into version control. Share project on GitHub. Let's see, I think this is my GitHub password, yep. All right, so we're gonna call this guy, I guess, CSC535 Android, let's call this Spring 2017 Android tutorial, something like that. I'll click share. It's going to automatically select all the stuff that it needs, and notice it already knows about my couple of files here. So I'll go ahead and hit OK there. It's already up there on GitHub. There it is. Now, just as an example, if I go ahead and I add a new image here, Oh, by the way, that's my updated logo for Grace. See the little ninjas that I hid in there? That's better logo, right? Definitely a better logo. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and let's grab another turtle here. So we'll grab Michelangelo. So we'll save image as. This guy is Mikey. And we'll keep our sizes the same. So we'll go and edit this guy again real quick. We'll convert, adjust the size to 1 inch. Save that. Okay, so now I'm going to go ahead and add this guy to the project the same way I did before. So I'm going to go to Drawable. I'm going to right click. I'm going to say Reveal in Finder. Go into Drawable, and then I'm going to go and drag Mikey in there. Okay. And you're going to see it's going to pop up here in a second, so it's available. Close it and reopen it. There we go. But notice that it's currently in red there. It's not being supported by version control. So if I right click on this guy and then I say, let's see, where's the... Oh, go to Get and then go to Add. Do you want to add the following file to Git? Yes. Now he's being tracked. Okay, so now if I go into VCS and I go to Git and I go to, actually, I want to do this. I want to say commit changes just in there. And notice it's seen my one new picture there. And I'll say Mikey pick. And then I'll go ahead and I'll hit commit. Then I'll go up here and I'll do push. Actually, I think I need to go back in there. What was it? Push? You can actually do it from the commit thing. There's a commit and push. No, that's not what I want. So how do I just push? There we go. So now I want to push it. But let me show you how you should have done it to begin with. I'll make another little quick change. So that's pushed now. So here, I'll add a little comment here. Then I'll go up here to VCS. I'll do commit changes. And I'll just do LOL. Now, on commit here, there's one that says commit and push. So this does both. Okay, some files contain problems, no errors, 2 warnings found, that's fine. So I'll say commit. Then it asks me, do you want to push? I'll say push. Now it's actually up there on GitHub. So here's that folder on GitHub. I go into app, then source, then main, then this guy, there's my main activity, and there's my LOL comment. That makes sense? All right, so I'll put this link in here. Now, one thing you can do, let me show you one additional thing here that'll make your life easier. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to close this project. All right. Now, you can go into your, there's a couple different ways of doing this. So let's say I'm up here in, you go home and you want to open my project in Android Studio. What you'll do here is you'll navigate to where my project is. You'll do clone download and just say download zip. You can actually do this directly from Android Studio, but this is probably the most straightforward way of doing it. So this downloads a zip file. I'll go ahead and unzip it, so it automatically unzips on a Mac. Okay. Now, when you come inside of this guy, what ends up happening is, and this is where things are a little bit different. On a Mac, the top level directory here is actually your Android project. On a PC, your Android project will actually live inside of here. Okay, so Now that I have it downloaded, I put it in my my downloads. I'm going to go open an existing Android Studio project. Here's my downloads. Here's that project. All right. On a PC, you will find that project file inside here. I think that might be it. But PCs become a little bit weird because you'll see the little Android Studio icon here. You do not want the top level one on a PC. You want to go into that folder and you'll see another Android Studio icon inside of here. That's the one you want to open. On a Mac, the top level one, it knows how to look for it. So I'm just opening it, and it's when this pops up, it'll say unregistered root because I didn't check it out of the studio. So you could just say hit ignore if you want. It's not a big deal. And then you can come in here, and here's your whole project that's in here with your drawables and all that stuff to run it. Okay, so that's how you check my code out. All right, questions, comments, concerns, bribes. Remember, exam will be up by Friday. You have until 2 weeks from today by, let's say, midnight to take it. Make sure you give yourself 3 hours to sit down and take it. It shouldn't take you that long, but it's on a timer, so once you start it, you have to finish it. Otherwise, the grade will be bad. This homework is due 2 weeks from today because a lot of you are gone on spring break next week, so that's fine. I will also be gone, but I am around to answer questions. So if you have a question, text it to me or send it on Slack. If I don't answer it during the day, just make sure you send it again a little bit later in the day. So I'll be golfing with my dad during the day, so it might be hard for me to respond. But a lot of times I will respond. But I'm definitely available to answer your questions. I'm going to be sitting in a hotel room for 9 hours at night. So it's take advantage of me if you need me to answer questions or something like that.
How many questions will be there?
The exam is, I think, my exams are almost always 10 questions, each worth 10 points. There will be several programming questions, and there will be several kind of short answer questions. No multiple choice or true-false stuff, but a good way of studying will be to look through your the slides here. And like I said, I mean, I can sit here and tell you not to look at the slides while you take the exam, but you can use your notes and stuff because you're going to do it anyways. So I might as well allow you to do it. But keep in mind then that when I write the exam, I write it with the knowledge that you have your notes in front of you. Kind of makes sense? But, the exam should not be overly difficult if you've gotten out of the class at the bare minimum what you should have gotten out of the class. That means that, you did all your homework, whether you worked in groups or you did it yourself, you learned from the homework assignments. That's the important part, is you learned. So what we'll find out on this exam is, did you actually learn stuff or did you just get work done? That makes sense? Now, like I said before, I'm not out to fail a bunch of people. I know programming is difficult, and I told you the first day of class. 8 weeks is the worst way to teach programming. This is not the correct format for this class. But it's the format that we have. All right? So that's why I really want to encourage all of you to come back and take that second class, because it's a skill set that I think is really important. Try to do very well. Try to do as well as you can on the final. Show me that you've attained a level of competence, so that I can give you a reasonable grade in the class. Does that make sense? Okay, so if you literally just give me nothing and you screwed up all your homework assignments and you sucked on you give me no choice. Okay, but if you put in the effort, you show me that you know some stuff, give me all the reason I can to give you a B, right? Because that's what you need is your minimum grade in your classes and stuff like that. So I get it, okay? And then, commit to me that you'll come back and take the next class so that you can get the rest of the programming intro that you should get in a full semester-long course. It's like a double whammy. Not only should the class be 8 weeks long, you definitely shouldn't be sitting there listening to programming for 4 hours straight. You're checked out after an hour and a half or so. This class should meet 3 times a week for an hour per session or something like that for 16 weeks. But that's not how it works, because a lot of you have jobs and you're working professionals and just the way it is. All right, so I'll put the homework assignment up, but it's basically implement D20 gaming dice. Okay, I'll probably just say that on it in Android. So anybody have any questions about what that app does? We pretty much have our mind wrapped around it. Okay, I will see. Well, I'll probably see you around campus at some point in a couple of weeks. But otherwise, I hope to see most of you. When's the 537 is next fall, right? Okay, so strongly encourage you to take that class. I think you'll learn a lot in there. You'll do a lot more, and we'll do all Android stuff in there. All right, have a good one.